Hello. So this is technically the last chapter. It's not actually really a chapter. It's more just snippets and chunks from the original that kind of got edited out. So it's more so like the future and just little short stories. So I plan to post this actually at the same time as the last chapter, which is technically 21, or I'm sorry, 20. This is chapter 21. But before we get into it, I do just want to thank everyone who has listened to this and has gotten this far. I genuinely didn't think I'd ever get people listening. I mostly just started doing this because I'm a big audiobook listener and I wanted to be able to listen to audiobooks of these fanfics that I love that haven't been done before. But I've gotten so much support and so many listeners, and I just want to thank everyone for listening, and the comments always make my day, and just seeing how many plays and downloads and everything. So thank you so much for that. I will be starting a new fic. It's going to be Dear Your Holiness. So another not safe for work fic. If you know me in real life, don't look at me. But I will be starting that next. It will probably be uploaded before this is even out, because I do just want to start doing more, and I have a plan for the one after that. So we do have some plans going on over here, but I wanted to let everyone know that I appreciate all of the support and everything else. But with that said, let's get into it. Chapter 21. And dressed as you are, girl, in your fashions of fate, baby, it's too late. Remus lifted his head and blinked a few times. Saw a horrible tan color in front of him, dingy and dull, before he squeezed his eyes shut and tried to come to. His back felt like it was stuck half hunched over, but there was long hair spilling against his cheek that smelled of smoke. A soft shirt, warm from him. Sirius glanced down and smiled softly, something gradual and sweet, before nudging Remus's forehead with his nose. The window next to them allowed a view of all the stars, even the teeny tiny ones, and Remus felt Sirius slump further into the seat, turning into him. Pulling his knees up, an arm wrapped around Remus, holding him tight. Inky black sky with a smattering of clouds. It was late, and they were on their way back to Texas. They had gotten the keys to their new apartment not 5 hours before getting on the plane. Just enough time to pack up the motel they had been staying at, move in, and run out the door. Sirius yelling the entire time, "Too much excitement for one person to handle, Moons." They sat in the truck for a good 20 minutes, parked outside the new place. It had been raining, all their stuff shoved into the cab with Sirius pressed against Remus. He had thrown the truck into park in their parking spot, stared at the dark brick of their apartment, and it was silent between them. Everything was theirs, a lifetime of this and that they were about to reach out and take. Eerily silent in the cab, the importance of the aged brick and how it was built to resemble what would become their home was simultaneously the most mundane but spectacular view Remus had ever seen. It was an almost bittersweet moment, the metaphorical finale. All they had to do was grab their things, walk inside, and set them down. How silly it was to be so far from those years of life that dragged you down. Every day, Remus woke up and struggled just a bit more to remember what it was like to rouse to empty sheets, stained walls, taking the trash out, and sighing at a bag full of empty beer cans before going to work. Silent and watching the clock, alone and searching for some sort of purpose. Because sometimes the walls were still stained in those motel rooms, and sometimes the sheets were empty. Remus still dealt with trash, twice the amount of beer cans now, and yes, he watched the clock, but it was all different. Rewriting the bad, taping over it. Empty sheets were only because Sirius had not come to bed yet, had not thrown himself down and gotten his side of the mattress wet, demanding to switch with Remus, giving him the damp pillow that smelled of shampoo he'd have to flip. Those stained walls were temporary, and now Remus could shove the trash at Sirius and make him take it out. Glancing at the clock was only to make sure that they had time to make it to the liquor store before it closed. The future was not scary, but vast, and although Remus did not feel he had a purpose in being put on Earth, he felt like he was halfway to creating one anyway. Whatever it may end up being. 4 walls and a roof. Remus walked in there with Sirius, And by God, they were going to stay. A wide and open living room that smelled old, but that inviting kind of old. Massive windows on the opposite wall. Remus stared at them and thought they'd always be warm. He had thought of Sundays spent doing nothing the first time he saw them, and then his mind went to years later, what it might look like on a random Tuesday or Friday. 6 years from then, 10, and then maybe even 20. Birthday mornings and drunken nights with too much space to run around, the stars watching and ensuring they were making the most of it all. Sirius resting his head on the back of the couch, turning to look at him, painted by the sun, just to remind Remus that the stars he had spoken to got back to him finally. Sirius was one, after all, a star, and they let Remus know often that they were doing a beautiful job. The moon may win out, as Shirley loved Sirius the most, but he looked so beautiful when the sun gave him a moment as well. A kitchen off to the left, with high ceilings that sound carried through. They could have a place to move about as they pleased, things set where they wanted, touch and dance, and someday they would argue, and maybe there would be crying, and there would also be laughter at all hours, and the late-night hugs in the kitchen that Remus would let last hours. A hallway to the right, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. They had bought the building. Sirius wanted it all, and what Sirius wanted, he got. It was not much, but it was more than Remus thought he would ever be afforded, so it was perfect. A moment later, Sirius landed a fat kiss and threw himself out of his arms, running into the open and empty living room. And Remus fell in love again. After all, it was his favorite thing to do. Maryneal was about a 3-hour drive from Dallas, and by the time Remus came to, they were passing the familiar, long and winding stretches of road that would look like absolutely nothing to anyone else, but he knew that they were close. The phone lines looked the same. He could tell even when they were cast in shadows, only lit up by the headlights. An innate feeling, the way the lone streetlights they passed every mile or so led the way through the twists and turns surrounded by dirt and old farmland. He poked at Sirius, paid the man when they pulled up, and it was a little past 9 that evening when they both stood on the sidewalk in front of his childhood home. It was dark out. They could hardly see a thing, but it was like a low-pitched ringing in the back of his head, like when you know something is off, unnatural. Remus was afraid of coming back to a whole bunch of nothing, but was equally as fearful of coming back to a whole bunch of something. But Remus knew with another's hand in his own, they'd always be able to leave. They were not stuck. They had made it out and were just stopping by to collect a few things on their way home, like a quick dip inside a gas station, or getting something to eat at a drive-thru. Sirius had come back, kept his promise, and Remus knew it was going to be all right. In and out, they were just passing by. Sirius sighed and shoved his bag at Remus before fumbling for the truck keys in his jacket. He held out a hand. "Give them to me." "What?" "The keys, Moons." He gestured to the front door. "Give me the keys and I'll go in first." Sirius's head peeked out of the hallway, and he was grinning. He looked like he was up to no good, and Remus wanted to cry. Felt like there were entirely too many emotions in him for one person, maybe at least enough for 5, easily. It must have been the fresh optimism fighting against old fear, dredged up from the bottom of his person, taking on the shape of thoughts like he'd turn around and his parents would just be there. No time to explain, as if they would be able to look at the two of them and see Remus had been up to absolutely no good. He had never considered until that moment the way the world might see them, standing next to one another, and he hoped, maybe, in some world, his parents might look at the two of them and smile. That was the optimism Remus was still trying to get used to, but then backing that feeling was something else. This sense of, it didn't fucking matter. Come tomorrow, they would be gone for good, hell or high water. But there Sirius was, standing with his arms crossed, leaning to rest his head against the wall. It was as if not a day had gone by. They decided to get up early, pack Remus's things, mail them home, and then catch a flight back to New York. But it was 4 a.m, and Sirius was giggling and rolling around in Remus's bed like he had a secret agenda only he knew about. Record spinning in the living room, all mischief and hushed whispers. The room reeked of weed. The walls were probably grateful for the high, and Sirius had never been in his childhood bed with him. First time, last time. You know I love you, right? Remus hummed, raising a brow and peeking at him from the corner of his eyes. They were lying on their back, staring up at the ceiling, and Sirius grabbed his cheeks, tugging Remus's head to the side, and blew smoke into his mouth. He shook Remus's chin. Right? Eventually, they moved to the couch. It was an unspoken thing, doing the things they used to do one last time. As them, now. One last hurrah, but kind of the opposite. One last adventure, but the other way around. For them of the past, for them now. The couch, having missed Sirius's shape and warmth, surely. The walls were smiling, happy for them after all they had been privy to over the years. Then it turned into something like, we can sleep when we're dead. We can only do this right now. They did not sleep. Instead, they did just about everything else. Let's make a fucking mess of it all. Total fuck it. The comforter was forgotten on the couch, and Sirius got up and walked to the kitchen, found a half-eaten and very stale box of cookies, and returned, hand shoved in there, and handed one to Remus. Crumbs on the floor, on the corner of his mouth. Remus had come back, but his parents had not. Sirius ate the rest of the cookies while they sorted everything. That lasted about 15 minutes, and then it was smoking what little of the roach they had left, and both of them kind of just lost their mind. The last of innocence leaving, laid to rest where it was born. The last of the hope the house had provided was being sucked up. Sirius turned on the radio, pushed back the curtains, and they tossed the biggest middle fingers they could to the place. Took every part of themselves from it.
Storm clouds are raging all around my door. I think to myself I might not take it anymore.
Remus had Sirius over his shoulder, the blanket in his hand, dragging on the ground, as he tried to... Remus didn't really know. Shouting over the music, hitting Remus's back, trying to get him to put him down.
Take a woman like your kind.
He was dancing them around the living room, scooting over the coffee table and bending down, almost dropping Sirius to bring a couple of the boxes over to toss things into.
Find the man in me.
And then Remus leaned down, let Sirius flop over his back, and land upside down on the couch. Sirius laughed. It was all giggles, and he scrambled off the couch just enough to tug Remus down with him. Tangled limbs, the couch scraped against the floor, and the rug was pushed out of place. Then Sirius was up, running across the living room to the kitchen, fumbling over himself in his socks as he shrieked, and Remus tried to catch him.
But oh, what a wonderful feeling. Just to know that you are near.
What was once just grabbing a few things turned into digging through cupboards and taking pretty much anything that they wanted. It looked like they ransacked the house after 20 minutes in the kitchen, cabinets open, and things all over the counter. The fridge door ajar, Sirius letting Remus know he was making them both a sandwich, then realizing there was no bread. They were on the cusp of something grand, the rest of their lives, but they had never been more Remus and Sirius than they were in that house. Boxes were found in the garage. The kitchen table was piled with clothes, records, and little tiny knickknacks. Sirius took what he liked. Remus took what he wanted, and they worked in tandem. They kissed in the bathroom, Sirius's hands shoved under the back of Remus's waistband, where he was perched on the counter between Remus's hips. They kissed on the table, kissed on the kitchen floor. Eventually, it devolved into laughter, and Remus picked him up and just walked around the place, kissing Sirius to make sure they got everywhere. Eventually, they took a break and sat on the front step. Music spun softly in the house, and Remus's old car was still parked in the driveway. The door was open behind them, all the lights were on in the house, and the sun was just starting to peek over the horizon. Cigarette smoke bled into the open door, and neither of them spoke. Sirius's bare arm was pressed against Remus's. Sirius's boxers were red, and his were blue. There were boxes in front of them on the sidewalk, half open and spilling with stuff. Shirts and coffee mugs and little pieces of paper. Books and old jeans Sirius was determined to fit into again. a cup that used to hold both of their toothbrushes from the bathroom, and Remus's comforter with a handful of records set on top of it. They had come for some of it and decided to take it all. 6 boxes. 6 boxes of their life. Their life was contained in 6 boxes. A visual representation of the then that they would take and put in the now and turn into the after. The rest of the forever, on and on until they go. All the boxes were shoved into Remus's shit little car, and they stood in the living room one last time, and it was beyond bittersweet. The feels Remus felt would never be understood. They were too big, too vague. He didn't have the words for it. Remus looked around and saw home, but it was not home anymore, had never been home, and that was unfortunate. Home was in the boxes. Home was with Sirius and the things he touched and loved like Remus loved because he understood. Home was back home, 4 walls to dance in, empty and waiting for them. But Sirius stood next to him, and Remus looked over at him and smiled. A quirk of the mouth, and he leaned up, gave Remus a quick kiss, and it was fine. Didn't matter after that. All those feelings vanished. He sighed and walked over to the kitchen. Sirius followed and sat at one of the bar stools, resting his chin in his hands and watching as he grabbed the phone. Dialed his own number, let it ring, and the voicemail picked up. Remus took a deep breath, stood in his kitchen, and stared at Sirius, and let it all go. "I'm not sure when you both will be back, but it's..." Remus quirked a brow, and Sirius spoke softly, mouthed a date. "It's May 21st, and I'm leaving. For good this time." "I don't know," Sirius said, wide-eyed and gesturing where he was sitting at the kitchen island, cigarette between his fingers. There was a little pile of ash on the floor Remus kept sweeping up every 10 or so minutes, sliding the ashtray across the counter increasingly more aggressively. Sirius continued. "I swear, he's just fucking obsessed with me, babe. It's a bit concerning, really." He was silent, listening, and then nodded, taking another drag. "No, he does that too?" A pause. "I know. Fuck. The AC went out a few days ago. We got it fixed the next day, but I was like, get off of me. You're too fucking hot." Another pause. "Oh God, that's what he said too." Sirius looked over, winked, and stuck his tongue out before returning to his conversation. Remus rolled his eyes, pressed the box he was breaking down against his chest, and folded it in half. Watched Sirius stare out of the corner of his eye, apparently enraptured by Remus's strength and ability to fold thick cardboard boxes in half. Hey, whatever gets you there. "Lily, I don't know how you do it," Sirius said, twisting the phone cord between his fingers, looking every bit the brat sitting there, entirely too conspiratorial, side-eyeing Remus. "Where's James? James! I want to talk to him too." Sirius's new favorite thing was talking on the phone. To James and Lily, really. That's it. He would sit there for hours and hours, talking and talking about a whole bunch of nothing. It had only been 4 days since they returned, but it had happened every morning, so the pattern was clear. It was a lot of substanceless gossip about how Remus was obsessed with him, valid, and how Remus was hot, right? And how he was hard to sleep with when the AC went out for one night. Today, they had covered the topic of that TV show we love, which Remus didn't even know they had a TV show they loved, James's inability to get out of bed before 10 in the morning, and how Lily had made a whole thing of Rice Krispies 2 nights ago, and they were already gone. Sirius had his little chair, even put a pillow down to cushion his smart ass, and would sit there and talk and talk and talk until Remus inevitably took the phone, dismissed some sort of ridiculous claim he made, and told James and Lily that he loved them and they needed to visit soon. Today was a Saturday, and they were supposed to be going to find a couch and a bed frame and everything else one needs to furnish an apartment. They'd only been awake for less than 6 hours, and Sirius was already sitting in that damn chair. The apartment was getting there. They had a mattress and a dresser they had gotten already, but other than that, it was a lot of things just lying on the floor. They needed surfaces, things to put things on. The walls were bare, and Remus was doing a knockout job of unpacking, but there would be considerably fewer steps involved if they could just buy some shelves. Remus was tired of his back hurting from the bed situation and knocking over the glasses of water Sirius just had to have before bed, set on the floor too close when someone tossed the comforter around late at night. Their clothes were neatly stacked in two piles, dirty laundry shoved in another corner. The lamp Sirius just had to get the other day was on his side. Remus's books, a little stack he emptied his coins and wallet onto at night, on his. Remus had no lamp. Sirius was in charge of the light situation and often fell asleep with it on, which required Remus leaning over him to fumble for the pull, and that was a sentence punishable by death, it seemed, most nights. Sirius huffing and puffing, being much less amicable now that they were settled in their own bed. Once he was out like a light, Sirius either reprimanded Remus within an inch of his life for daring to jostle him around, or Remus risked arms wrapping around his middle, getting trapped in a tangle of Sirius, who just refused to let him go. It wasn't much, but they were working with what they had. No flowers. No, it's kind of hurting my eyes. But also, that red one is ugly. No, Remus nodded, biting at his nail, standing next to Sirius. I agree, he mumbled. But I like that brown one. Brown is ugly. Well, do you want to paint the walls? Sirius glanced over and paused, said plainly, Well, I don't know. I forgot we could do that. Suppose we should have figured out what color to paint the walls first, but brown goes with everything. Yellow? Remus scoffed. God, no. I just think... Baby, I don't... Remus rubbed at his forehead, turned, and rested a hand on his hip. I don't really care. I just want a couch. But the couch is important. Okay, well, then you pick. Sirius crossed his arms. The brown one, then. You're just saying that because I like that one. No, he argued. I like it because you like it. That makes it special. And Remus just loved him so much, this never-ending ache that had settled deep in his bones, led by touch and want, and it was overwhelming. Knowing Remus could take Sirius to bed, got to sleep next to him every night, curl up and hold him close like it was the last time. That's how Remus chose to live his life. Like every night was the last, but it never was. That's what made it all okay. You're gonna burn it. Sirius turned to look at him and narrowed his eyes. You make it then. Well, I don't want popcorn. That's a lie, and you know it. Remus only hummed, leaned forward, and ashed out the joint in the tray on the coffee table. A last-minute purchase, they had gone with the first one they saw, and it wasn't too bad. Matched the couch well, which actually turned out to be green, not brown. It was a confusing moment, both of them too high and staring at the violently green couch once it was in the apartment. Somehow, it had all fit in the truck bed. They drove home extra slow, lest the couch fly out, and they had to decide on another one. Remus listened to Sirius toss the popcorn into a bowl and walk back over. He set it on the coffee table and made to plop down on the couch again, but Remus caught him around the waist and pulled him into his lap. What are you doing? Sirius mumbled around a mouthful of popcorn, a few falling on the carpet under them. Remus rested his chin on his shoulder and settled Sirius where they could both see the screen. Getting comfortable. Well, I'm not comfy. You'll be fine, he said. You said the couch wasn't comfy yet either. Can you even see the movie? Don't need to see the movie. Another huff. Well... And Sirius's head fell back against Remus's shoulder when he placed a kiss to the base of his neck. Soft and warm, Remus couldn't help but moan at the taste of Sirius's skin after not tasting it for so many hours, drawn up from the back of his throat, a knee-jerk reaction to his favorite flavor of heaven. Feeling like he wanted to take a bite out of Sirius, swishing him around like mouthwash, and swallow. Dig his claws in like a rabid dog, bite and tear, and God, he could never get enough. Remus lost sleep over it, pulling Sirius close and shoving his hand under his waistband just to feel the warm curve of his thighs under his fingertips. The way they fit, obsessing even in his sleep over the feel of his lips dragging across Sirius's arm. It was intoxicating. Sirius wasn't much better. You'd think they loved each other or something. We're not watching the movie, Are we? He mumbled. No, we're not, Remus said, smiling against his shoulder, pressing his teeth against skin and squeezing Sirius's hip where he was settled against his chest. Well, I mean, you can. But I'm going to fuck you if you'd be so kind as to... Sirius whined. But movie. Then you can sit there and watch the movie. Remus moved his fingers along Sirius's bare chest, hooking his thumb under the top of his boxers, pulling them away, playing with the soft hip there. But I need to fuck you, baby. Please. Well, what about earlier? Sirius said. Call it suspense. Remus huffed a laugh. I need leverage. You get everything you want. I know it's gone to your head. Don't know what you're talking about, Sirius mumbled, but his arms came to rest behind Remus's neck, messing with his hair. Remus loved it. It was an equal match. Neither could get enough. Neither had found their way to that more, and Remus adored it. Though there was nothing more beautiful in the world than Sirius's eyes rolled back, mouth parted as he choked on a sound Remus had dragged out of him in their apartment. Under him, with the door locked, no one in, no one out. Both feet on the ground. They were where they were meant to stay. Remus still had a really hard time believing in it all, and thought he might turn to religion just to give a reason for it. His great-grandmother had been Catholic. Surely there was a scripture somewhere that would give reason as to why Remus was able to shove a hand down his boxers and slick Sirius's cock with spit. On their couch, in their apartment. Away from the world, Remus took Sirius apart every night and put him back together by morning, just to do it again. And maybe that was the more. The in-between where neither of them knew exactly where they were, but with each other, words falling from their mouths. Sirius craved it, sometimes spouted off shit that hardly made sense, but Remus understood. Understood the noises he made and what they meant, his tells, and where to push and prod to hear what he wanted. Remus played Sirius like an instrument he'd been born with in his hands and only continued to fine-tune. Sometimes it got a bit much, harsh fingers and Sirius slapping away Remus's hands when he couldn't get what he needed, not for lack of trying on his part. Remus would give in and let Sirius use him as he saw fit. On top of him, soft thighs, his moans turning to whimpers and wet lips. It was a never-ending give and take. Someday, they'd make their way to the moor. Neither of them were too concerned with when that would be, though. They had all the time in the world. He shoved at Sirius's back, watched as he leaned forward, and turned the sound down before settling back in Remus's lap. It was skin against skin, and Sirius smelled of home, heavy in his lap. The place, not the destination. And Remus was already breathing heavily as his fingers found their way beneath his boxers, smoothing over his thighs. A small whimper escaped Sirius's lips, and Remus smiled again, kissing behind his ear. What is it? Nothing. No? Remus asked, dragging his lips over Sirius's skin and pulling him close with an arm around his waist. He took Sirius's cock in his hand, soft under his fingers. Remus knew what Sirius was playing at. I'm not going to fuck you until you tell me you want it. I want to watch the movie. A deep laugh. No, you don't. And Remus brought his hand up, roughly licked his palm before wrapping it around Sirius again. It was slow, unhurried movements, nothing too much. Sirius wanted to watch the movie. He could watch the movie, and Remus would watch and listen to him. The way his breaths picked up, the way he tried to squirm but was held in place by Remus's arm. Tightening, crushed against Remus, Sirius wasn't going anywhere. His legs fumbled, thighs twitching. Remus shoved Sirius's boxers down and let it slide as Sirius hurriedly kicked them off, leaning in close next to his ear. He said, Spit. And despite wanting to watch the movie, Sirius looked down and spit on his own cock. Remus felt it fall over the tip, between his fingers, slick and wet, and grinned. Good boy. Sirius moaned, tossed his head back as Remus moved his hand faster, firmly, and drew another gasp from his pretty lips. They were past the figuring it out stage. Remus knew how to get Sirius there, and sometimes he just wanted to make him come. Just wanted to, for the simple fact that he could. Sirius's hips lifted, and Remus pressed his hard, filled-out cock against his ass. Oh, you like that? Remus asked, and Sirius was silent. He turned his face and felt Sirius's lips brush against his own as he spoke again. Tell me. And Sirius was as bad as Remus, could never hold off for too long. Please. You've got to do better than that, baby, he said, a faux pout as he nodded to the bowl on the table. You popped popcorn and everything. And he felt Sirius's grin spread across his lips, felt the nip of teeth as he settled further into Remus's lap, and his knees fall open. He rolled his ass against Remus's cock and let out a huff. Fuck the popcorn, Sirius said as he nearly knocked it over, writhing again and catching the bowl, shoving it back on the table with his foot. Please, Moons. Oh, fuck. And Sirius whined, something pitiful and deep in it from his throat, as Remus gave his cock a squeeze, ran a thumb over the tip. Felt it weeping. Sirius was needy and needed, and Remus would give, but only after he had earned it. What do you need, baby? I want to give it to you. Remus kissed along his neck, letting Sirius feel the teeth. I've got you. Tell me what you want. And Remus loved this too. Something brought out of both of them. A loss for words, how to describe it. Remus knew what he needed, what he wanted. Sirius wanted to be fucked until he was a puddle wherever he lay, entirely too spent until Remus had to carry him to bed or the bath, letting him loll his head against his shoulder and mouth at Remus's neck until he came to. Remus slowed his movements, dragged his hand up and down Sirius's cock in time with his heavy breathing. Torture, Sirius had called it once before as he bit down on Remus's shoulder when he came. They had a lot of free time. Make another pretty sound for me, and maybe I'll fuck you, Remus whispered. Fill you up, carry you to bed, and fuck you again. A high-pitched whine. Sirius canted his hips. I know you like that, like lying in bed at night after I make a mess of you. You push your hips back against my cock. You beg for it so pretty. Remus let out a deep breath. Let me hear you. Please, baby. Remus hooked his legs around Sirius's, spread his knees wider, and doubled down. Listened to Sirius's breath hitch as he tried to arch away from Remus, but he held him close. There. Under his fingers. Remus felt it when Sirius fell apart, tossing his head back against his shoulder as his lips searched. His chest caved under Remus's grip, and he let out one last please before Remus felt him spill over his hand. Hot and wet, it slipped between his fingers and slicked Sirius's cock further before Remus was standing, arm around his waist, and moving them. Sirius was tossed on the couch, face down. Please, I just need... Baby, Remus said, running a hand over the soft back of his thigh, lifting and pushing his knees further apart. Can I please just have you? Please, Sirius begged one last time before Remus watched him arch into the touch. Yes, always. Remus smiled and leaned down, pushing the hair away from Sirius's face. He gave him a kiss, something simple amongst it all, and I just love you, separate from everything else. Sirius's fingers were fumbling with Remus's boxers, and he batted him away, shoved them down. Felt the same fingers again, brushing against the underside of his cock, and Remus groaned. Spat out, Fucking stop it. Shut up. Well, stop moving. Well, fuck me then. Sirius shot back, and Remus laughed. Laughed and shoved him further into the couch, fingers digging into his thighs as he leaned down, roughly spitting on his hole before drawing up, thinking twice, and spitting one more time. He pushed a thumb in, tugging Sirius back with that and a hand around his thigh. Remus sank into Sirius on the end of a sigh, spine going a bit watery at the feeling, a bit slack. He let his hips settle, resting against Sirius's ass where he had a hand gripping the couch. Shifted his weight and heard Sirius groan as Remus let his head fall back for a moment, smiling to himself. A bit smug, quite happy, and very in love. How do you want it? Hard. Remus paused, leaned down, and felt Sirius swallow around his fingers as they pressed against his neck, tilting his head back to meet his eyes. Yeah? Sirius only nodded, and Remus watched his face fracture as he drew out and slammed into him. Only once, but it was hard. Clearly what Sirius had been wanting, if the silent gasp that left his lips was any indication. Fractured, split apart in an instant. Remus smiled, a quick peck of a kiss against his forehead before he let Sirius go, and he fell forward. His knuckles were white where he was gripping the arm of the couch. It was 2 more thrusts, Remus grinding his hips, fingers digging into the soft skin of Sirius's ass. Roughly reaching over, putting his weight into it, and shoving the hair away from Sirius's face. He wanted to see. Remus didn't give Sirius a moment to catch his breath, a hand on the back of his neck, keeping him in place as he fucked into him. Fast, hard, like Sirius asked. The fingers digging into his thighs were rough, lifting and pulling Sirius back, making him give Remus more. All of it. All of him. Breaths punched out of him. The apartment was silent. Sirius was loud, and it was bordering the line of entirely too much. His fingers flexed, his shoulders lurching as Remus set a heavy pace. Remus's knee was digging into the cushion. He used his other leg as leverage to fuck into Sirius and heard the couch scrape against the hardwood floors. Felt his thighs shake with it, a smile as Sirius tried to speak. More. I can take it. Please. Too good. Too good. Oh, fuck. Sirius was crying out, arms thrown over the side of the couch as he tried to find purchase and lift back. He wanted to get fucked hard, and he was getting fucked hard, and Remus wasn't having any of it, shoved at his back when it threatened to arch, keeping him down. Take it. Moons. Anything you want, baby. Fuck. What do you want? Harder. Sirius grit out, finally getting his hands under him, lifting and shoving back against Remus's cock, buried deep. Fuck me harder. Fucking hell, Remus cursed. Felt the burn everywhere. Felt Sirius hot around him. Like a fucking angel. Fucked out on my cock. He felt the sweat on the back of his neck, let go of Sirius's thigh, and felt the loss of that before his hands were digging into the swell of Sirius's ass, splitting and spreading him open. Always take me so fucking good, baby. Let me fill you up and fuck you so good. Each word punctuated with a heavy thrust. Sirius was a vision, but Remus needed him closer. Needed to stick to him. Needed the sweat and the taste. Wanted the noises closer, louder. Need you more. More. Please. Sirius gasped, hung his head before Remus pulled him up. Lips pressed against his ear, an arm wrapped around his waist to keep him close. Look at me, baby, Remus mumbled, feeling Sirius match his pace, hips working to drive his cock deeper. Let me see your face. Yeah, just like that. Sirius turned. Remus brushed the hair away from his face and smiled, pressed a kiss against his lips, tasted Sirius as he licked into Remus's mouth, and groaned, melted into him further. Remus grinned. Stick your tongue out. Sirius let his lips part again, did as he was told, and Remus pulled him closer with a hand around his waist, shoved 2 fingers into his mouth, resting them on his tongue. Suck, love. And Sirius's eyes fell back. He hummed, and it turned into a deep moan as his head lolled against Remus's shoulder, and he sucked. It was high-pitched noises, and Remus knew meant more, and right there, and please. Fucking hell, you're too pretty, begging for it. Remus gasped, feeling his hips stutter and his knees go a bit weak. I'm gonna come. Fuck, you want it? Remus ran his hand down Sirius's waist, his chest, and found his cock. It was 2 dry tugs, and then Sirius was coming, Remus's fingers hooked into his mouth, and he bit. Grit his teeth and bit, and Remus groaned through the sharp bite of teeth and pain and came. Hand falling from Sirius's cock to push his knees further apart, burying himself as deep as he could. Sirius's lips parted, and a string of mumbled and incoherent curses spilled from them, his hand finding Remus's back, pushing them further together. Sirius smelled of sweat, like the coffee they had drank too late that evening when Remus buried his face in his hair, felt it soft and sweet against his own lips as Sirius's name fell from them. Remus took one look at Sirius and shook his head. Nope, no, not happening. He raised a brow, watching as Sirius stood in their open door to the apartment, and tilted his head to the side, anticipating what Remus was about to say. No. Whoa, whoa, well, wait. Sirius held out a hand, shuffling everything he was carrying around, and Remus shook his head again, with a bit more urgency this time. Just... Baby, what on earth... He was just there. He? Well, Sirius said, glancing down. Actually, I think it's a girl. I'm not really sure, but look. Sirius dropped the last grocery bag he had been sent to get, fumbling and holding out the cat towards Remus, like he had not seen the cat, and this would help their collective case. The cat blinked at Remus, little white-socked feet dangling before Sirius pulled him back to his chest and stood his ground. A beat of silence, he stared at Remus, exuding confidence, which meant Remus was losing, and losing fast. Please? No. Remus, please? How do you know that's not someone's cat? Remus huffed, swiping a hand down his face. Sirius scoffed, hugging the thing tighter to his chest. It was sad-looking on the side of the road, near the gutter and everything. It could be a gimmick, Remus murmured, thinking about a cat and having to have a cat. It seemed like a big thing to take on. Sirius was enough, and the cat was looking at Sirius like they were in love, and Remus had only a bit of fight left in him. By God, he was going to use it. Moony, Sirius gave him a look. This cat is not trying to pull one over on us. Please. Silence. Please. Silence. Remus moved his hand and peeked at the two of them. Big mistake. Very cute. Fuck. He held up the cat again, out towards Remus, and it even gave a little meow. Kind of looked like it was frowning and sad. Sirius had always been better at strategy, clearly, and batted his long eyelashes. Please. Maryneal was a town a bit too north and a bit too west from being smack dab in the middle of Texas. It had a population of less than 100, one gas station, one grocery store left, and a sad smattering of houses scattered around. You could probably drive through the town in almost 10 minutes, the type of town where, if you blinked, you would definitely miss it. New York, on the other hand, was massive, entirely too overwhelming. There was no silent nights where the cicadas threatened to burst your eardrums, and there was no longer a lone car passing by at night, rare and startling you out of your sleep. There was not a screened-in porch Remus could stand on at night, no back pasture that was still and silent in the winter months, sometimes a rare blanket of snow weighing down the grass, lending way to a smooth and blank, empty canvas. Remus traded all of that for slick city roads, lights everywhere, of all colors, reminding him of each one and why he loved them. It was hot, but not sweltering, and there was a gas station on the corner opposite their building. And most of all, Sirius was there. All of the time, around every corner Remus turned. On the couch or in the kitchen, the sight was still so startling that often Sirius would turn around to Remus, just leaning against the hallway, watching, appreciating. Every once in a while, he'd close his eyes, remember being young, and open them. The same sight, just a bit different. Every weekend, whenever Sirius dragged himself out of bed, they would walk to the coffee shop down the way. It was different. It was a bit daunting. So many people around, and Remus only knew one. That was enough, though, and Sirius walking next to him was something like armor, but Remus still stared at the menu with wide eyes and finally just repeated whatever Sirius got. They'd walk back, kiss in the hallway, get the truck keys, and then go shopping. There were still things they found they needed, didn't know they were missing them until they needed cat toys or a cheese grater because Sirius wanted nachos so bad at 8 in the evening on a random Tuesday. It was a lot of running to the store, shit Remus had never even considered needing, and a whole lot of things they didn't, but Sirius wanted. Both of them a bit too enraptured by the fact that a strainer could be theirs. Those are our towels. Those are our eggs and milk. Our toothpaste and our spoons. The New York roads were always busy, even in the dead of night. When Sirius was knocked out cold, Remus would lie awake and listen. Curled up in bed with Moomy and the Snoopy stuffed animal Sirius just had to get the cat. There was no longing. He found himself content. Really, all of the time. It settled over him like a warm blanket or a heavy leg wrapped around his middle, refusing to move. But it was different, and change is scary. It catches up to you. You're almost entranced by the concept that you can change, and then you find yourself on the other end, staring up at the textured ceiling in a home that is just starting to feel like a home, and it's a fresh wound. Something new growing. You planted a seed, and now it's becoming, thriving, alive, and turning into something so beautiful every day that passes. There were plants, Sirius having insisted on them, and Remus's books were stacked on a bookshelf he had spent way too long putting together. It wasn't even satisfying to set them on it in the end. There was an extra cereal bowl they had in the center of the kitchen table, filled with bent bottle caps. So, it was the plants and the red, a rug under their feet, and a couch. A coffee table, a dresser with two sides, and a closet with hangers that were theirs. A fridge and groceries, and Remus could walk into their kitchen and get water in one of their cups. A leather jacket hung next to the front door, right next to their pile of boots. Sirius was all excited jitters as he tossed Remus's shoes towards him. They smacked against the side of the bed, and then it was underwear and a shirt thrown on his head. Moomy meowed, and Sirius hushed her, much to the cat's non-amusement as it curled back up between the pillows. Remus hardly had time to yawn before he was forced into the passenger seat of the truck. Sirius damn near buckled him in, Remus only swatting and smacking his hands away so he could just get on with it. The dash told him it was a little past 6, the day barely alive. No traffic. It was an easy drive wherever they went, Remus tossing out a mumbled, "Where are we going?" to which Sirius only shushed him, kissed his fingers, and smacked Remus on the forehead. "Close your eyes," he said, and pulled away, shifting gears and turning. "Now, Moons." "Stop looking at me and watch the road, then." "Remus, I swear—" Okay. Remus held his hands up in defeat and felt the truck jostle a bit as they slowed down. "They're closed." A good 5 minutes passed, and Remus was fighting not to open his eyes as the truck slammed into park. "They're fucking shut, I promise." Sirius cursed. "Well, I'm just saying—" Then it was quiet, but he heard Sirius giggle. A moment, and then he heard footsteps. The passenger door opened, and it was Sirius's fingers digging into Remus's arm as he hauled him out of the truck. Okay, keep them closed." "I'm not looking, baby, I promise." Remus still didn't know what the fuck was going on, but he knew Sirius was smiling. He smiled too, loved hearing it in the tone of his voice, and stepped carefully as Sirius led him around the bed. Remus heard him take a deep breath, curse, then grab his hand. Felt Sirius fidgeting next to him, fingers crushing his, shoved between the gaps of his own, and comfortable. Remus went to squeeze, but his hand was batted away before something cold was dropped into his open and waiting palm. Then, it was Sirius's arms around his neck. Suddenly, he was behind Remus, and he was starting to get disoriented from having his eyes closed for so long. Sirius's chest pressed to Remus's back, and his voice was unsteady from excitement. "You know how I told you I owed you a lot of birthday presents?" I recall, yes." "Okay, consider this like a third of them, maybe." Sirius kissed the side of his neck, and then he was gone. A moment later, "Open your eyes." And Remus did, and he didn't see a fucking thing besides Sirius in front of him. Didn't know where he was, didn't really care, and couldn't focus on anything but Sirius before him. Too big hoodie that had been Remus's, swallowing him whole, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Remus felt like he should look away, but his smile. Fuck. It could move mountains. He was sure of that. Pink-cheeked, it was cold. Sleeves of the hoodie balled in his fists. The pants, but they had a rip in the knee now. Sirius had picked at a string a bit too much. Remus saw the bit of tattoos peeking out and thought of the rest of him. Thought of Sirius. Standing in front of him just then, out in the world. The freedom of it all, and how they could do that now. Remus got to see him in the wild. Watch Sirius use that smile of his to cut through the world. Saw the slicing and the way those around him fell. Sirius looked like what seeing the world might be like. The bottom of the ocean, the awe you'd have to witness a place most wouldn't. The top of mountains and the desolate deserts, beautiful in their grand expanse. Bits and pieces, your favorites, all shoved into a person too big for the world they had been dropped into. It was that cosmic, that otherworldly, and the divine. Celestial and ethereal. Sharp teeth, soft skin. Juxtaposition, a study in having this, but also that. Eyes that stole everything from Remus and promised even more in return. Sirius was his favorite person to open his eyes to. It never got old. But then Sirius paused, rolling those lovely eyes, and gestured wildly behind himself. "What the fuck? You have to look!" So Remus did, and his mouth parted, dropped open, and he took in the worn red brick. A wall of windows, a little red door nestled between them. It was blank, the sign above the entry, but it was a building. Small, but not quaint, and from what Remus could see, it was empty, but had once been something. Sirius was grinning, and Remus laughed. His shoulders went with it. It was a sort of manic laugh, his brain not quite computing. "What? We're business owners!" Sirius yelled, tossing his hands up, and ran to Remus. Remus fell forward and watched as Sirius turned back to look at him, tugging him along by the hand. The lights were as bright as the music coming from the club across the street, and Remus heard James slam the truck door shut behind him. His hair was down that night, fanning around Sirius when he looked back, skipped past the curb, and dragged Remus along, yelling about, "Come on," and "Lily's already across the street, look." But Remus thought Sirius looked like everything. In the sense that, maybe in all the lifetimes, there was a moment like the one he was in. Sirius holding his hand, outstretched, and maybe sometimes his hair was shorter, or he had a few less tattoos. But a smile tossed back like that surely had to span space and time. Travel the cosmos, made of whatever was above them, floating around and giving the look in Sirius's eye meaning. Remus grinned back, jumped the curb, and pulled his hand out of Sirius's. Wrapped his arms around his waist and picked him up, felt his head fall back against his shoulder, and the most stunning laugh he'd ever heard mixed with Lily's voice across the road. The building Sirius had picked out for the shop, what they had begun to refer to it as, was actually perfect. He wouldn't have cared if it wasn't, but Remus had watched Sirius run around the empty space that first day, hands shoved in his pockets, Lily's laughter bouncing off the tall ceilings, and he had decided he was meant to live life. Actually live it, have a part in it all, decide and do, act and live. Supposed he had watched it begin to unfold in front of him that day, Sirius's bright eyes as he ran towards Remus, threw his arms around his neck, and nearly toppled them both, trying to kiss him. Lily and James had only come down for a day or so, just to be there for the grand reveal. What a concept. And left a few days later. Keys in hand, heading back to pack and then move in and settle into their life permanently. Across the hall from them, Sirius was all smiles, and Remus tried to fight some of his own. Didn't want to be overzealous, but found it no use. Sirius was standing on a tall ladder in the shop, huffing and puffing, trying to paint the corner of the room. Doing a fine job of being dramatic, Remus leaned against the table, crossed his arms, and watched. The second week of working on the shop had them both passing out as soon as they hit the bed. Sometimes it was Remus lazily shoving at Sirius's jeans, not wanting to sleep next to someone wearing jeans. Other times, it was Sirius dragging Remus to shower, sleepy fingers tugging at his, the water far too hot, but most nights, the shower ended with Sirius gasping against tiles before his forehead was pressed against Remus's chest. He always wrapped his arms around Sirius's shoulders and held him close under the spray. Sleepy smiles tossed around, matching toothbrushes. For about a week, it was Remus brushing Sirius's hair and braiding it. He liked it because it made it feel a little wavy, and then Sirius was over it a few weeks later, but Remus still brushed his hair. Always lightly smacked him on top of the head with the brush before walking back into their bedroom. The sheets were green that night, and Remus was kneeling on the bed, staring up at Sirius with his cock in his mouth. One hand pressed against the small of Sirius's back. His knees were unsteady on the bed as Remus kept him close. The hand in Remus's hair was just teetering the line of a bit too painful as he flitted his eyes up to meet Sirius's again. Felt Sirius's cock brush the back of his throat. Stared up at him like a reverent god. Fuck, Remus had smoked too much. Just enough. Time slowed. He moaned, and Sirius's knees did buckle. The feel of his hand slipping on Sirius's sweat damp back, the shower useless. The sheets would be smeared with it come morning. Sirius's fingers scrambled for his, heavy breaths and a begging for it not to stop. More, more, more. Remus fell over Sirius on the bed and smiled down at him. Sometimes it was hard and fast. Those times the need for more manifested much too quick. They had to extinguish it before it grew, like a wildfire hitting them upside the head. Whispered words in Remus's ear, having a quick kiss in the grocery store bread aisle, turning into clipped thank yous as they checked out, the groceries spilling out of the sacks and onto the floorboards as Sirius threw himself at Remus in the truck. Other times, it was like this. Nothing to be said that hadn't already been. It was more about the way Sirius's hair caught the light that spilled in the window from the streetlight outside. The way Remus sighed, the way Sirius took him, let him do as he wished. Sirius on top of him, both of them boneless and rolling in the sheets. It was about how they touched, like they had all the time in the world. Like they were able to drag it out, turn the hours into double or triple if they wished. The sun only rising once they allowed it to. Sticky skin pressed against the others, basking in the in-between, a cadence of their own they had created. The sound of cars soft in the late city that never slept. Sirius mumbling, confessions from swollen lips. Remus nodded, murmuring back things that they knew were just for them. Never to be known, spilled at the altar they had found in the other. There needn't be any kneeling, yet there was. Horrible thoughts, led out into the world and then snatched up, like Remus shot his hand out, captured what Sirius wanted him to have before it could get too far. They worked through it all until it became too much again. Let's try for that more again. Remus rolling over, brushing Sirius's hair away from his face. Leaning down, lips against his skin that smelled of a life they had built. Brick by brick, piece by piece. Years in the making. Sirius too far gone, mumbling confessions and declarations that would make God scoff at his audacity, turning choked, to whimpers. Into the early mornings, the sheets were kicked off the bed, and Sirius had Remus's fingers in his hand. Turning his hand over, tracing a few of the worst scars, mumbling nonsense as the AC in the apartment teetered on too cold, Sirius having stolen the blanket. One of his knees was up, knocking against Remus's thigh, with a steady rhythm. It had rained, a rare rainy day, and the streets were slick and bright, red and green and yellow lighting them up. Remus stopped to fill up the truck, and Sirius pumped the gas while he went inside, grabbing them both a pack, and made quick work of it. Remus shifted gears, tossed his arm behind him, and pulled into evening traffic. Sirius banged both packs against the dash, packed them nice and tight, and grabbed them each a cigarette, shoved both in his mouth and lit them, handed Remus his, took his own, and turned the radio on. Remus made it under a yellow light, and Sirius turned it up as loud as it was go.
I wonder how you're feeling. There's ringing in my ears, and no one to relate to, save the sea.
And Sirius's voice was just as lovely as ever. He looked over at Remus, smiled, and stole a quick kiss, kicked his boots off, shoved his feet under himself, and leaned out the passenger window, arms out, hair whipping in the wind as they made it through a handful of green lights.
Who can I believe in? I'm kneeling on the floor.
Remus took a sharp left and heard Sirius let out a loud laugh.
There has to be a force. Who do I phone?
They made it under another yellow light, and the night seemed drawn out, like maybe they could take the long way home. Breathe in a bit more of the freedom they swallowed down every day, eating up the roads that were just for them. Remus took a sharp right, heard another loud laugh, and Sirius glanced back at him. It was always the glances back, like Sirius had to ensure he was still there, like he loved looking behind him and seeing Remus, and Remus loved the view. The slight smile, the way his eyes shone, and he was always so fucking happy.
Someone thought of healing, but all I really wanna know.
There was no other way to describe it. It was just being happy. They were happy. They had made it, and they were free. Remus took the highway exit, shifted gears again, and felt the truck lurch as they sped up to merge. The windows down, Sirius pulled hair from his mouth to take another drag, dangerously close to lighting something on fire, but his arms were out the window instead, burning up his cigarette.
I want you. Show me the way. I want you. Show me the way. I want you. Day after day.
Try and kick me again. Remus raised a brow. See what happens. Sirius scoffed, lifting his knee, and shoved at Remus's side. See what I deal with? He's mean. Not cool, man, James nodded, and Sirius turned his head and nodded at him. He's actually so mean. I tried to break up with him once, and he just said no. Remus rolled his eyes, caught Sirius's foot, and shoved it back into his lap. He tried to break up with me, too. Lily lolled her head to the side and pushed down her sunglasses, pursed her lips. And when was this? I don't remember, Sirius shrugged. Sometime around the second time I asked you to marry me. Sirius snapped and pointed at Remus. Sounds about right. And they were somewhere. Remus wasn't sure where, but between lying her head back, trying to drown out Sirius and James with Sirius's head in her lap, Lily gave vague, at best, directions to the lake. She let them know the night before she had, in fact, visited New York once when she was younger and spent a few days camping. Remus did not camp, did not want to camp, but had shrugged when Sirius had said he wanted to go to the lake. So, to the lake they were going. Early Saturday morning, with beer in the back of the truck, James shoved in the footwell, leaning down to block the wind and light a joint. He handed it to Sirius, whose feet were still in Remus's lap, kicking him every once in a while. Something like he could not be bothered to get up and kiss him, so I'll just kick you instead. Lily pushed her sunglasses up again, tossed an arm out the window, and rested her head in the corner of the cab. Sirius spluttered, trying to take a hit, and she pushed his hair away from his face. Both apartments were in a state. Boxes still needed to be unpacked, furniture still in the hallway that James and Remus had been too tired to move the night before. They had been there for almost a week, and had been too excited to take the time to do something as silly as unpack. James had spoken about his job, transferring, and he had been offered a position with someone his father knew in town, but had hummed, said he was thinking about it, whatever that meant. Lily had already enrolled and transferred to hair school in New York, but classes didn't start for another month and a half. She was antsy about it, was the type that always liked to be doing something, but Remus supposed they were going to the lake. Once again, all in the truck, shoved in there, and Sirius took that moment to nudge him again, poking at his inside of his thigh with his foot. Quit it. Sirius met his gaze and rolled his eyes. Remus gave him a pointed look, got over Elaine, and turned on the radio. He turned to Lily, and she mumbled something after peeking over her glasses, for what Remus was sure was too short of an amount of time to really tell where they were, but she said, Just keep going. Too busy sunbathing to be fussed, apparently. Lily shoved her sunglasses back up, settled against the open window, and mumbled a random exit number Remus was sure to forget by the time they even got remotely close to it. The truck doors were open, and the tailgate was down. Remus heard Sirius shriek, and it was a sunny day. One of the nicer, Remus would guess, since they had moved in. Hot and heavy in the sky, everything was bright and warm. The type of comfort the world could provide on special days that were meant to mean something. Days that made you appreciate waking up early, more hours in the day, and all that. Sirius yelled at James and shrieked as he swung out over the water and let go of the rope swing. Landed in the water with a loud splash, resurfacing a moment later, shaking his head and letting water wash over Lily a few feet away from him. James was next, climbing up onto the seat before he swung out and, in a few times, finally flopping off the thing and nearly taking Sirius down with him. They both came up again, and water started splashing a moment later.
I'm gonna find me a hole in the wall. I'm gonna crawl inside and die.
Moons! Sirius bailed out of the water, ran over to him, and yanked at Remus's arm, dragging him along. Remus laughed, grabbed another beer, and opened it before letting Sirius pull him towards the swing. You think it'll hold both of us? Baby.
Come later now. Meet old woman love. Never told me goodbye.
Sirius smacked his arm, climbed up, and balanced on the little wooden seat before holding a hand out to Remus. Pink cheeks from that same sun, warming them all, and wet, entangled hair. Lake water ran over his skin. He looked alive. Holding his hand out, beckoning, and asking. It was one of those days Remus was grateful for. A reminder of why he'd always go back and do it again if he had to. He set his beer on the uneven grass and took Sirius's hand. Balanced on the swing with him before Sirius held on, threw his weight back, and started swinging them.
You see, can't you see what that woman she been doing to me?
If this breaks, Remus started, but Sirius shrieked again, losing balance a bit and almost toppling them over. If it breaks, just make sure it breaks over the water. Fuck.
Can't you see? Can't you see what that woman she been doing to me?
So they swung, Remus tossing his weight around with Sirius until they got so far over the water that they were nearly horizontal. The swing held, the branch above creaking but steady, and Sirius's eyes were full of life. Remus had never seen him like this before, and thought maybe it had been building and building, replacing that old with the new. They finally tipped the scales, where everything was new. Everything was fresh, with a fresh, still-drying coat of paint. "Ready?" Sirius asked, eyes bright. Remus huffed and nodded as he looked down at James and Lily, her on his back as they stared up at them on the swing. "Ready," he nodded. "On 3?" Sirius nodded, firm. "On 3." Remus stood before their open apartment door, keys dangling from his fingers, grocery bag about to break, and let dinner fall to the floor and roll away. He had heard music as soon as he came in the front door, only getting louder as he made his way up the stairs. It was a bitch to carry groceries up the stairs, but he had only one bag that time. Lily and Sirius needed apples so they could make apple pie, because Sirius had mentioned apple pie, and then they were suddenly making apple pie, but had no apples.
I'm floating in the most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today.
Lily was concentrating, utterly immune to the chaos around her in the form of flour just about everywhere and eggshells tossed on the counter. It was in her hair, it was on her dress, and her tongue was peeking out her teeth as she gave the crust her all, kneading it.
For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world.
Sirius was holding Moomy. More importantly, he was dancing with Moomy, who looked entirely too pleased for a cat, and further reinforced the idea that Moomy was not a cat, but more some alien. Remus still didn't know what the fucking thing was, but he looked perfectly content to be spun around by Sirius in the kitchen living room. Some strange twist on what would appear closest to ballroom dancing, as if Sirius knew how to do such a thing. "Planet Earth is blue, Moomy," Sirius sang, "and there's nothing we can do." Remus loved the damn cat a little more just because Sirius loved it. Acted like it was such a baby, singing to it, and he held Moomy up then, spinning slowly as its little socked feet dangled, and it looked around, utterly unaware of literally anything. Sirius rocked his hips, widening his stance, and let his little feet hang before drawing the cat back to his chest, spinning over to Lily and glancing over her shoulder. Moomy peeked too before Sirius gasped, spun back into the living room, and finally caught Remus's eye. With a smile worth all the stars in the sky, he danced over to Remus and leaned in close.
Tell my wife I love her very much. She knows.
Ground control to Major Moomy. He arched a brow before reaching up, kissing Remus, grabbing the grocery bag with his free hand, and leaning to set it on the kitchen table. He took Remus's hand and started to sway with Moomy pressed between them. Remus rolled his eyes, petted the thing on its head, and met its sweet little gaze before his hand was on Sirius's waist, and he was dancing with them both. A wonderful, beautiful clusterfuck of a disaster. That's what the night was the first time they went out after James and Lily moved in. Sure, they went out the last time they were in town, but it was nothing more than a few drinks at the bar. James had smoked. Sirius got silly. Nothing extraordinary. They had all been in bed or passed out on the couch by 2 in the morning. Minor groans the following day. Nothing an ibuprofen and a kiss couldn't fix. It was almost 9, and Remus was sitting on the couch, watching Sirius walk back and forth between their apartment and James and Lily's every 5 minutes, wearing something different every time. By the time the joint he and James were smoking was 2/3 of the way gone, Lily and Sirius were hauling a pile of clothes across the hall, giggling and laughing and whispering. The disaster of a night started then and there. Something like a landslide that went Sirius to Sirius in leather pants to Sirius in leather pants sitting in Remus's lap. It was always the fucking pants. Remus looked to James for reinforcement, for some sort of solidarity. He just needed someone to acknowledge that this did not bode well for Remus's person and his ability to think straight, make rational decisions, and function properly at 100%. James was gone. Lily nowhere to be found. Sirius was staring at him like he knew exactly what he had just done, determined to deliver Remus's early but timely death at the hands of his hands on Sirius's thighs as he, slipped a knee over to straddle his lap. He leaned in, lips brushing against Remus's cheek as he whispered in his ear, "Tell me something sweet?" "Nothing I have to say is sweet," Remus managed to get out, hand smoothing over Sirius's ass, up and up, fingers dipping under the waistband. Innocent, really. Sirius hummed. Good. Then he was up, standing in front of Remus, holding the truck keys on his finger, swinging them around. They had been in Remus's pocket, and he felt like he had just had one pulled over on him. Felt a bit unstable, a bit wobbly-kneed, and like maybe they should just stay in. He caught Sirius around the waist, nearly too late, as they stumbled through the front doors of the apartment building a few hours later. Hauling him up around the waist, he felt Sirius's head fall against his shoulder as a laugh escaped. Olympic-level skills, carrying Sirius around the waist up the stairs to their apartment. Sirius kicked his foot out as Remus went to finally take the last step, and they both went tumbling forward, Remus hitting his shin. "Fuck." "Oh, fuck," Sirius panted. "Shit, I'm so sorry." But Remus was on Sirius, acutely aware somewhere in the back of his mind they hadn't even made it off the stairs yet. He had one foot on the last step, the other knee between Sirius's thighs as he shoved a hand under his neck and brought their lips together. Pressed his knee between Sirius's legs, felt his cock the moment he licked into his mouth. Remus's head was spinning. He was too high. With that one shot and joint, suddenly, he was God. "I love you. Feel like my head's fucking..." Remus groaned, suddenly livid to have no words to describe it. "Oh, fuck. You feel too good." Sirius's skin under his fingers, a hand shoved under his shirt. Remus paused, looked down at the tattoo again, and shook his head. Looked up and met Sirius's eyes, lidded and red as ever. His mouth was parted, and Remus could feel his heavy, measured breaths under his touch. Time picked up again, and Sirius yelped when his arm bent at a weird angle. Remus trying to tug his jacket off. And then it was his shirt, hands under his thighs as Remus got him up. A hand behind Sirius's head when he pushed him against the wall. Sirius's back arched into it, rolling his hips against Remus's lower stomach, boots knocking into his back. "I want you to fuck me." "Baby. Hallway." Clearly, Remus was past complete sentences, but he got his point across, and then immediately decided that was a stupid fucking point because Sirius's warm fingers were messing with the button on his jeans, dipping under his belt. It was a tight fit, but Sirius let out a breathy sigh and smiled when Remus couldn't help it. He shifted enough for Sirius to take his cock in his hand. "You just can't get enough, huh?" Sirius scoffed. "Not when you're looking like that." Remus declined a response, instead wrapping a hand around Sirius's wrist, stilling his hands as he kissed him. It was entirely graceless. Sirius's teeth, sharp as ever, bit down too hard on his lip, soothing it a moment later. Remus gasped. His knees went a bit weak, but he held onto the back of Sirius's thighs when his cock brushed against Remus's. "Fuck, I love you," Remus said, feeling the blood well between his teeth and gums from the force of their kiss. He only made it 2 more steps before falling against the wall again, so close to their door, really. Remus nipped at Sirius's jaw and kissed the skin there, running his nose over the curve of his delicate, sweet shoulder. He drew back. The hallway light was old and useless, but the red tinge was there, and Remus was enraptured. Red. Always red. "Yeah, okay, like that." Sirius's head fell back, teeth pressed together. "Right there. Oh." Remus was consumed, had Sirius pinned, and took a moment to appreciate the person under his fingertips. Remus appreciated him every moment of every fucking day, but when he looked like that, trying to form words, the only thing that could fall from his lips was a broken "Mooney." Well, fuck. Remus glanced behind him, noticing the door only a few steps away. They were almost there. Jesus fucking Christ. It felt like a mile, trying to get to their apartment, to a bed or a surface, anywhere but the hallway they shared with other people. Remus's grip tightened again, and he threw his weight back, felt Sirius's hands tighten around his neck as he stumbled the rest of the way to their door. He rested Sirius's back against it, trying to fumble for the knob as Sirius regained a semblance of what was going on, trying to get Remus's shirt off as well, but his hands were shaking, thighs warm under his grip. "Fucking take it off, please." Remus found the doorknob, turned it, and they fell backwards into their apartment. Remus sat up in bed, squinting, trying not to make too much noise. Stealthy, but in the dark, it was hard to distinguish what was just a mass of blankets and what could be Sirius. Gently petting around, the blankets were empty. Sirius needed to be in bed, asleep. The little clock on the nightstand told Remus it was a little past 3 in the morning, and when he got up, he saw the bathroom light on, the door closed. Rubbing at his face, he cursed and tossed the blankets around to find his boxers before pulling them on and nearly face-planting when he tried to get up. He caught himself, hissing and pausing with a hand on the doorframe before sneaking out of their room. He leaned back, checking the bed one more time, and could hear the water running in the bathroom. Moomy was in the hallway, sitting against the wall, nearly scared the piss out of Remus as he shuffled down the hall and into the living room. He quickly stopped, opening the spare bedroom and digging under the bed as quietly as possible for Sirius's presence. Moomy meowed, the fucking traitor. "Shut up, Moom," Remus hissed, pointing at the cat. "Shh." He was followed into the living room. It was dark, with only the small kitchen light on and the Christmas tree lighting up everything a deep blue. Remus glanced down, didn't want to step on the cat, and paused when he got to the living room. Let his shoulders drop, arms falling to his sides as he huffed. "Really?" "Oh, fuck!" Sirius shouted, jumping and spinning around, nearly falling over, but catching himself with a hand thrown back and braced on the TV stand. "You fucking scared me," he hissed. Sirius was standing there, had just straightened up from putting his own presents under the tree, a lit joint hanging from his lips. Remus was put out about the ruined surprise of presents under the tree come morning, but he was also oddly hurt that if Sirius was going to smoke in the middle of the night, clearly he had not been invited. He tried to maneuver around the presents, Moomy walking over to him because, once again, she was a traitor, and Sirius took a small few steps to the right, hands behind his back, smoke falling from his nose. "Baby," Remus gestured to the tree with one of the presents in his hand. "I already saw them." "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're not even standing in front of the presents. I can clearly see them." Sirius glanced down, took a few more steps to the side, then to the left, kind of kicked at one, and apparently gave up and cursed. "If you had stayed in bed." "I was waiting for you to..." Remus paused. "Wait, did you turn on the bathroom light and the sink as a, what, a cover-up?" "Yes." Sirius crossed his arms, did a double take, and saw Moomy and scooped her up. "And it would have worked had you been asleep like I thought you were." "I was waiting for you to sleep." "I was waiting for you to sleep." Remus paused, narrowed his eyes, and leaned to try and see the present pile again. Sirius leaned with him, holding Moomy out and down to try and block Remus's view. "How many presents did you get me?" "None. You were bad this year. You get coal. That's a lie, Remus hissed. How many did you get me? I told you. Oh, shut up, would you? Sirius tugged Moomy close and walked up to stand in front of Remus. Of course I got you presents. Don't act like you didn't get me any. Of course I got you presents. How many? Remus sighed and held up the little shuffle of presents he had been holding. 3. There's 4 there. Moomy got a present too. The cat looked at Remus, and he swallowed. Narrowed his eyes a bit, because, fine. Yeah, okay. The Christmas spirit, whatever. He loved Moomy. Moomy was great, the best cat ever, but Remus still knew she didn't necessarily like him. And maybe presents would help. Remus didn't know. The cat was clearly smarter than most. Perhaps she'd recognize an olive branch if he extended one. Stop laying on his sweaters and trying to smother him in his sleep with her tail. Moomy got a present? Sirius asked, voice soft as he looked at Remus, a delightful smile on his face. Really? Yes. Remus also got the cat a present because he knew he would get that response from Sirius. And yes, it was 4 a.m, and the surprise had been ruined, but the end result was the same, which was Remus wanting to kiss him stupid. Of course she did. I even got, little wrapping paper with fish. Remus didn't get to finish his sentence or explain how hard he and James had looked for fucking cat wrapping paper the other day, and how once Remus decided he needed it to be special wrapping paper, he couldn't just use normal, and how James must love Sirius a whole lot too, because he had been just as invested and damn near cried when they finally found it. He didn't get to explain that. Maybe would later if he remembered, because Sirius let Moomy down and had his arms wrapped around Remus's neck a moment later, and they were kissing. Sirius fumbled with the presents in Remus's hand, grabbing them and walking them back a few steps to toss them in the general direction of the tree. They hit the wall and toppled, but Remus paid it no mind, instead focusing on Sirius in his arms, leaning up, and Remus grinned into the kiss. Reaching down and lifting him under the thighs, he felt Sirius wrap his legs around his waist. Remus closed his eyes and tried his hardest to calm his racing heart. Wyatt still did that when Sirius was near, in his arms, just about anything. He had no idea. He didn't quite mind it, not when Sirius laughed as he deepened the kiss, a soft chuckle, and Remus supposed that was how he felt. A breathless laugh, the air stolen right out of his lungs because his eyes were closed, but everything was still tinged blue. The darkness took on a blue tint, a lovely color that reminded him of the top of the skies before the sun finally set, and Sirius was warm and stealing everything Remus had to offer. They say to truly appreciate something, you must understand first. Remus had spent his entire life trying to understand things, why he was the way he was, whether that be good or bad, whoever may cast judgment, why he was there in the first place, late nights in bed wondering, why him? Why was Remus born the way he was? And why was he dropped to live where he had? Why was he given the parents he had, out of all the cosmic souls or black voids floating around? A pot of them for God to pick out and assign life on Earth. Why him? And he'd considered that all his life. When things seemed meaningless, you dig for meaning. Color can mean this or that, and shapes mean something. Stars remind you of someone you love, and moons remind you of someone you love and no longer have. You understand those things, what they mean. And then life comes by and kicks you in the ass, gets you up out of bed and makes you wake up to a phone call at 3 a.m. Stumbling over beer cans, there's nothing else to do. But sometimes, in trying to stay alive, you forget to live. Remus had lived enough for 1,000,000 lifetimes, he thought. He understood. Better than most, he'd like to think, and if someone wanted to argue with him on that, he'd let them. Remus would wave his hand and hear them out, not fuss, because he knew and understood what it meant to be him, what he wanted out of life, and where he wanted to be, what he longed for, and how to reach out and take it with a steady and expectant hand. Remus knew and understood the importance of forgetting, because no one ever really forgets, but the tangible bits of those sour memories in your brain fade away. You look back and can hardly remember what it was like waking up alone, because you wake up every morning with someone tangled around you. You can't really remember what it's like to stare at yourself in the mirror and brush your teeth in silence, because you're so used to seeing a flash of long hair, a fucking wreck entangled, rubbing at his eye and fumbling for his own toothbrush. You don't really remember what it was like, what went through your head when you got up one night to answer the phone. You don't remember the weight of the world when you sat at that kitchen island and answered the phone because you're not there anymore. You're not in that moment any longer. Instead, you're standing, staring at the one you love, the one that reminds you of those moons and stars and hot summer nights and rainy days driving in the truck, sitting at your own kitchen island, miles away from where it all started. Feet dangling, doubled up socks because the floors are a bit cold. Your sweater, hanging off one shoulder, and he's holding a beer, set on the edge of that counter. A different color, a different shape, but a faint memory, and that's all that's really left in our minds after time passes. Glimpses of the past, built upon. Sirius smiled at him, and Remus only tilted his head, righting the world because Sirius had this special ability to send it all spiraling out of control. Remus walked over, shoved at the couch with his hip, and felt it slide against the rug, out of the way and making room. Walked over to the record player, leaned down, and pushed the air vent with his foot, noting it was a bit closed. Outside was cold, but God, Remus was so warm. He found the record he wanted, deliberate and purposeful. Sirius liked it when he got a bit cheesy on him, and although it was cheesy, yes, Remus thought there was something special going on that night. The air, the snow outside collecting on the windowsill, all told of an importance Remus did not understand, so he could not fully appreciate, but he would try his hardest, always. He set the needle a bit back and straightened. Remus walked over to Sirius, held his hand out, and watched as Sirius finished his beer. Tipped the neck up and wiped at his mouth before sliding it back on the counter and taking Remus's outstretched hand. He hopped down and followed, and Remus supposed their home was the perfect place for dancing. Surrounded by their things, almost a year of getting to wake up every day and smile. Knowing you'd smile every day, knowing you'd laugh and feel loved. Felt what it was to be needed because, as humans, Remus thought to some degree, if you were not needed, it was hard to create a purpose for yourself. Sirius needed Remus, and Remus needed Sirius. Suppose they both helped each other figure out where their purpose started. And Remus had always needed Sirius, and now he was right before him, always. Sometimes Sirius was behind him, walking with Lily, but he always caught Remus's eye when he glanced back. Sometimes he was sitting to his left, their knees pressed together, tattoos lining up, and sometimes he was under Remus, staring up at him like he hung the moon. But that night, he was standing in front of Remus, staring at him like he was so fucking glad to be a star, to be larger than life, and share the sky with someone he loved. They had done it, conquered life on Earth as well as the heavens that hung above. Earth only had one moon and only one brightest star.
Need someone's hand to lead me through the night. I need someone's arms to hold and squeeze me tight.
Sirius fell into him. They were well practiced by then. His hands wove their way around Remus's neck, settled in nicely as he stepped forward. Remus curled an arm around Sirius's waist, under the sweater, and felt his warm skin. His other hand came to the back of his head, and Remus rested his chin on top of his head.
Now when the night begins, I'm at an end.
And sometimes he missed those early days.
Because I need your love so bad.
Remus found he missed the time on the road, seeing everything, and he had never felt as alive as he did then, he thought sometimes. Constant motion, the urge to go and do coming from a childhood where he could do neither of those things and was still. Like he had been let off his leash. Remus had tasted what it was like to have the world at your fingertips, but he thought there was something special about choosing to slow down, choosing to settle, making that choice.
I need some lips to feel next to mine.
He still remembers the smell of Vegas, shitty slot machines, and the sound of Sirius's voice as he sat in his lap. Maybe we'll win big. Georgia peaches and sleeping in a bed full of ding-dong crumbs. Lying in the back of the cruiser, tracing shapes on the roof of the car where there were none.
I need someone to stand
The smell of James and Lily's apartment, the color of the lights in every gas station and grocery store they had visited. He knew what Sirius looked like in purple honeymoon suites and behind a purple shower curtain. Tennessee sunsets and bright Nashville mornings. They could have gone on forever, driving that truck into the ground, but they came to a stop, and Remus had never been so grateful to slow down and just be still. He danced them around the living room, let Sirius sway them both side to side, leading as much as Remus was. The Christmas tree was still up, sitting in the corner of the room, well past its expiration date, and Remus rested his cheek on the top of Sirius's head, felt him warm and sturdy, the one Remus had invented love for. He watched the purple, blue, and red lights flicker in and out, painting them all the lovely colors.
And when the lights are low and it's time to go, that's when I need your love so bad.
It was early Sunday morning, far too early to be up unless you had never gone to sleep the night before. The sun was yet to rise fully, and Sirius was in his boxers, dragging Remus away from the stove where he was making pancakes. He can make those now, Lily taught him. Music was floating through the air, and Remus finally turned away after he set the pan off to the side and couldn't find it in himself to care about the time. Time was a construct anyway. Whatever. Remus didn't care. Not when Sirius looked like he had rolled out of their own bed. Hair a downright mess because he had rolled out of their own bed not 30 minutes before. Yelling about breakfast. Yelling for the cat. Loud and so very there. Sirius's hair was in 2 braids, slept on and sticking up everywhere, a bit of it falling out, but his smile was wide as ever. Unbridled joy, all around the clock. Jackpot, winning the lottery, making it under a yellow light. The whole 9 yards, you know the drill.
Well, I tried to make it Sunday, but I got so damn depressed that I set my sights on Monday, and I got myself undressed.
Sirius tugged Remus forward and watched as he held both of his hands, swinging them back and forth before Remus laughed, that same high laugh that was never not bouncing around the high ceilings of their home. Sirius got close, looked up, and tilted his head back, eyes bright and full of life. It was hard to fathom they had not always looked that way, but Remus supposed that was the point and meant that they were doing something right.
I ain't ready for the altar, but I do agree there's times when a woman sure can be a friend of mine.
He moved his hips, looked a downright fool, and Remus followed, tilting his head to the side and watching one of the braids fall away from his shoulder. Sirius was the contrast in the world, but it bled out. Bled through his fingertips, warm shoved between Remus's, and the sway of his shoulders as he danced them around their kitchen. Kitchens were for dancing. They had both found out very quickly.
Well, I keep on thinking about you, sister golden hair surprise.
And learning to make pancakes, and the large windows in the living room were for opening when they almost burnt the building down, Lily's appalled face watching as a tiny pancake went up in flames. James and Lily were for always having around, but also teaching Remus how to make the little pancakes into a vague heart shape. Socks were for almost slipping, and blankets were for dragging into the kitchen and wrapping yourself up when it's too cold. And you want to eat those same heart-shaped pancakes. Syrup was for licking off fingers, and those fucking rugs were for when they never quite made it to the bedroom after a sunny morning. Purple sheets were for when the green ones were dirty, and 6 sets of dishes were for having those you love and care about only a call away or a handful of steps and past a door across the hallway. And Sirius was for loving, however you wanted to take that. Remus huffed and cut his eyes at Sirius before hauling himself out of bed. They had danced for what seemed like hours, taking turns shuffling through their records and tapes. Sirius was curled up in bed, a little cocoon of blankets to fight off the cold, and was refusing to let Remus in on the warmth until he had water. Sirius shoved a hand out of his little pile of comforter and pretended to cough before Remus rolled his eyes. "Anything else?" Sirius narrowed his eyes, pulled his hand back under the covers, and tightened them around him. Maybe those cookies. Remus paused where he was tugging on his boxers, looked back, and grimaced. You did not. Sirius's mouth fell open. Lily just brought those over. Okay, well, you ate like 8 in the first hour and a half. I don't know. Okay, and how many did you eat, huh? Like 4. Sirius frowned and rolled his eyes. Surprise me then. Remus sighed and went to the kitchen, stopped by, and turned up the heat a bit. He switched on the light above the sink and grabbed a glass from the cabinet before filling it with water. Let the tap run, stared out the window at the falling snow, all the white lighting up the world, and nothing looked as dark as it usually did. Remus stepped back and glanced at the cup of water in his hands. He wiped a heavy hand over his face and opened the freezer, grabbed a few ice cubes, and tossed them in there on the off chance Sirius wanted ice, and he'd have to come back. Because he would. And then he shut the fridge door, and his eyes caught on a new little piece of paper stuck to the fridge. Under one of the magnets, James had gotten them, a tiny scrap of paper torn off what looked like a nearly blank piece of newspaper. A little star and moon holding hands. Sirius's unmistakable handwriting scribbled above them, an arrow pointing to the star and moon. Sirius and Remus, respectively. Remus took another step back and stared at the fridge. Almost a yellow color, Remus argued it was too pale to really be called yellow, but Sirius loved to make a point of calling it their yellow fridge. There sat the magnet Remus had gotten Sirius from the gas station, and it was holding a piece of paper with James and Lily's old number on it before they moved. Another scrap of paper had Frank and Alice's number as well as the number for the shop, in case Lily had needed it one time she was over and they were out. There was their song list, complete with the ridiculous Moomy edition, where, admittedly, Remus had written a song or two that he supposed reminded him of Moomy. Whatever had been playing lazy afternoons they spent doing nothing, the cat tucked between them as they watched a show. Remus had written those down so as not to forget. Takeout menus and the date of Lily's graduation, circled in red with a handful of exclamation points next to it. A stupid drawing James had done of all of them, said he had a dream one night, and Remus remembered him doodling, sitting while Sirius had been on the phone one afternoon, arranging some sort of shipments. Remus was a wolf, Sirius was a little dog, and James was a deer. A faded little drawing. Remus smiled and righted it. He bit the inside of his cheek and fought a laugh. At the alphabet letters spelling, I love you, and fuck me. And the pictures, most of all, he supposed. Still moments in time. Moments he'd never forget because they were right there. A handful of Polaroids tossed up there. One of Sirius on James's shoulders the night they decorated their first Christmas tree because, of course, Sirius got to place the star, and another of Sirius and Remus curled up asleep on the couch. His favorite, though, was one Remus had taken, a picture of Sirius sitting in their bed. Cross-legged, blankets around his waist. He was squinting and had a hand reaching out for the camera. The flash had gone off, and it had been much too early in the morning on his birthday, but Remus had been too excited to wait. If you looked close enough, hidden behind the world-renowned bedhead, you could see the hint of a smile on Sirius's face. Lips waiting to form a high-pitched "Mooney" a moment before Remus had tossed the camera on the bed and kissed him. Remus looked both ways and jogged across the street. Nearly lost his balance, but came to a stop on the other side, jumping the curb and steadying a hand on the truck. The hat Sirius had made him for Christmas was shoved on his head, keeping his ears warm, but his nose was near running and raw from the harsh cold, and even harsher heat they had been trying to use to combat the aforementioned. Sirius had the matching scarf, though, all bundled tight. Remus had wrapped him in it before letting the shop door swing shut behind him a moment before. I am not going to freeze to death in the 12 steps it takes to get to the truck. Counted, have we? I'm not going to blow away, either. You never know, Remus mumbled. I'd hate to have to go through the trouble to get you back. It was cold and had snowed all day, both of them watching it fall through the foggy shop windows. The novelty of the little white flurries had already worn off for Remus, but Sirius still stared at the snow like it was something abnormal and alien, entranced as he made the trek to the front door multiple times during the day, just to step out, poke at it, and then come back inside. Snowballs were banned in the shop as of last Tuesday, and James was banned from walking into the shop with his hands behind his back that same day. This was added to a running list of things that were no longer allowed in the shop, such as James and his snowballs, bringing in more stray cats, and Barty was not allowed in before noon on Sundays due to his general demeanor and the one time he passed out hungover on the couch for so long. Sirius had freaked out and thought him possibly, maybe, dead. But the disastrous weather onslaught had stopped for a moment, just for them, it seemed. It had been a slow day. Sirius curled up with Remus's sweater on, freezing to death, as he put it. They needed better heating in the little place. It was quite drafty, but despite the nip to the air, Sirius dozed off as he often did on slow days, only to wake up and insist he had not been asleep, but Remus told him no one was coming by anyway. The roads were too bad. He had tried to get him to go nap on the couch in the back, but Sirius only gave him a look and laid his head back on Remus's shoulder. Acted as if he was just appalling that Remus could ever suggest such a thing, despite knowing there was a perfectly warm couch and blanket back there, even a coffee machine. Maybe it was a ploy for Sirius to make Remus another cup of coffee. Maybe not. Who knows? They could have stayed home, but Remus knew Sirius liked getting up and having something to do every day. To care for and mess with. He had rearranged the records all day, hardly letting a single one play for longer than 10 minutes. He treated the shop and the things in it, Remus's books and his own baubles and bits, with the utmost care, only one who saw the items for sale, less things, and more tangible proof of freedom could. Every time they sold something, they took one more step forward. Remus thought Sirius was getting sick. He never did well with the cold, and his nose had been a bit rubbed too red. Remus was glad he had put the chains on the tires the week before. The news told him it was supposed to get worse that evening, everything freezing over. He kicked at them, heard the snow and ice break, and knew they needed food. They needed to buy Lily some flowers and were out of eggs. A grocery trip was due, and they had just closed the shop for the weekend. He opened the truck door, glanced behind him, and saw Sirius gathering up his things from behind the window across the street. The overhead light was still on, and it looked like he was mumbling to himself. Remus reached in, shoved the keys in the ignition, and turned on the truck. It sputtered. He cranked up the heat as high as it would go, and leaned toward Sirius's side to grab his smokes. Turning back, he watched the overhead light finally go off in the shop, and Remus settled against the bed, watching exhaust spill an opaque white as the radio cut on. The radio announcer let him know it was a bit nippy out, and Remus pressed his palm against his lips, taking another drag and waiting for Sirius like always. The truck heating up behind him, he kicked at a bit of ice stuck on the underside of the open door and tried to warm his arms. A new song came on, and Sirius finally left, turning around to lock the door. His hair blowing all around, caught up in the winter wind, he was jumping in place, from one foot to the other, braids under that knit hat, pulled over his ears, matching little fingerless gloves Lily had made him with the leftover yarn. Constant movements to try and warm himself, flipping through the keys on his keyring. Remus was bouncing his foot, waiting, but could feel the heat had finally given way in the cab. And it was that timing again, and divine intervention. Things too good for the likes of Remus, and forever and always. 4 walls and bed sheets, tiny pieces of paper, and a fur ball waiting at home for you, curled up on the couch. Matching coffee cups and miles of road in front of you. Someone you love on your shoulders, letting you lift them to the heavens. To show them off, as a way of thanks and a way of giving back. I have your most precious creation. Look how I love him. Sirius got the shop locked, turned, and found Remus immediately. As he always did, those bits and pieces that made the two of them who they were, begging and longing to connect once again. Sirius smiled that smile, red-cheeked and cold, fumbling with his things, glancing between not dropping them, Remus, and the road. Remus's sweater was swallowing Sirius whole. He looked close to freezing, but the truck was warm for them. Sirius looked twice across the street, but the cars were coming now. Slowly but steadily, a light somewhere too far down for Remus to see had turned green. There was honking, and Sirius's boots dug into the crunchy snow under him as he smiled.
We all do begin and dressed as you are, girl.
and Remus stared at Sirius across the street. Cheeks high and a bit of that nose scrunch, he shoved his hands in his pockets and rocked back on his heels, waiting to make his way over to Remus. Patient, he knew that they needed to go buy eggs and lily flowers, but they would get an entire weekend together, maybe a few days after if they got snowed in and lucky.
Your fashions are fading, baby, it's too.
Everything was lucky, though. Golden and red, purples and blues. Yellow lights, the street lights would flicker on any moment for them both, bathing them in hazy colors that painted the snow warmer than it actually was, turning late-night snow angels in dirty parking lots into beautiful paintings that others would drive by and wonder about.
Shallow are the actions of the children, all men.
It was the smell of the truck in a stained red interior. Too many things on the dash and a photo shoved under the visor of two people who had figured it out a long time ago, but only had to catch up to what the world knew, but they did not. It was lucky that Sirius got stuck on the other side of the street, reaching down to kneel on the wet ground to retie his shoe. Remus watched, had seen him dance around the shop all morning before opening, and stopped, cigarette held to his lips, ash falling from the tip and melting into the ground below him. The metal was cold against his back. Time stretched, and his breath stopped.
Fault was their vision since the ages began.
Remus saw the moment Sirius realized as well, his fingers pausing where they held the laces, ready to bunny loop them and call it a day. His head snapped up, eyes a bit wide, and Sirius hauled ass across the street. Not a moment wasted or lost. They weren't in the business of wasting something so precious. Sirius looked twice again for a lull in the cars and sprinted right towards Remus, his sleeves falling over his hands where they were held out, trying to keep his balance, and he damn near slipped when he got near the gutter, where he was all frozen over. A hand out, ready to catch himself, but Sirius hopped the curb, those same bright eyes twinkling. Dazzling, capturing Remus and holding him there, something like a red string and a honeymoon suite, the same color as that interior, wrapped around them both, never to be untangled. A knot tied tight, never to be undone. Sirius ran up to Remus and stopped in front of him, breath heavy and white as the truck blew more humid air around them, humming under Remus where he waited for him like he always did. In the rain, jacket held over his head as he ran across the road to start the truck and pull it up outside the shop. When it was hot, letting the cab air out when he rolled down the windows. In an empty home, knowing better things had to come, maybe Remus had known all along, waiting right by Sirius, no matter how far apart, because two halves of a whole would always come together again. That red string wrapped around them, never broken, just pulled taut. Two people leaning away from one another, it was inevitable that they'd spin together again someday, hold one another close, and never let go. He supposed the world was waiting for Remus to be there again, so Sirius could look at him and smile. Symmetry, a counterpart. Sirius grinned as Remus knelt and snubbed his cigarette out before tossing it to the side. The snow cold under his knee. He heard Sirius laugh cut through the radio and the sound of the city around them when he kicked his boot up onto Remus's knee. Their eyes met, and yeah, it was that forever and always, but it was also an extra long weekend and a vase of lilies that would be sitting on the counter come that evening. Hot cocoa to come, and a fluffy tail wrapping around your ankles when you finally get home after a long day. A knot tied years before, taking its time to unravel and hanging on by a thread. Biding its time, something like a red string, just waiting for Remus to be able to kneel once again after spinning back together. And he reached down, gathering those laces on Sirius's boot, and tied that shit as tight as fucking possible. Notes. In 2011, when gay marriage was legalized in New York, Sirius dragged Remus to the nearest courthouse so they could be married, 3 times as much. One for every lifetime I've loved you. We've got to get them all in this one, Moons. It rained, and was a random Wednesday. Harry got to hold the rings. Sirius kissed Remus before he was officially told to, and they remembered their vows from 33 years before. Everyone had work the next morning, and they promised to get together that weekend. Sirius and Remus went home and had one last first dance to Stand By Me by Mickey Gilley. The first time they watched Urban Cowboy in theaters in 1980, Sirius said he never knew how to explain it, but Remus was his bud, and a real cowboy would never wear that shit. Sirius cries every time they watch the dancing scene, and every time it comes on, Remus pulls him off the couch to sing and dance with him. The end.